Truth is making a comeback. America's Top Stories with Lisa K. Donner.
The situation in Venezuela is spiraling out of control, and it does seem a coup or change in leadership is imminent. Meanwhile, there are outside forces at work in toppling or propping up the Maduro regime. The obvious suspects: Russia, Cuba, China, taking the pro-Maduro stance. The U.S. and many others hoping, praying, and perhaps doing a little bit more to topple Maduro. Once again, thousands of citizens have taken to the streets in what can only be termed a very volatile situation. Joining me now to discuss the changing situation in Venezuela is Liberty Nation's managing editor, Mark Angelides.
Hi, Lisa. Good to see you.
All right, first off, how is the whole thing playing in the UK?
In the UK, there's quite a lot of interest, specifically because our leading party leaders, Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn, have both expressed an interest in the Venezuela situation. Theresa May from a Five Eyes security point of view, obviously for the cooperation we have with the US, Australia, Canada, etc. And Jeremy Corbyn because Venezuela was his socialist model. He was a big supporter of Chavez and seems to think the Maduro regime is doing well.
Well, he's in direct contrast with the people of Venezuela.
May Day in Caracas, and the opposition leadership called its supporters out on the streets again.
So as we look at this footage of the May Day protests and more that have been happening recently, what do you think of the situation there?
What we have sacrificed will not be in vain.
Well, so far there hasn't been too much violence. You'd expect a fair bit because this is essentially, it's a soft coup. It's something that we haven't really seen before. We've seen a lot of strong military coups before, but a soft coup, not so much. So there have been episodes of violence. There have been some shootings.
There were protests in other cities too.
Whether that's just soft bullets or actual bullets, we're not sure yet. But it's a big sea change happening there.
Right. So what you have is a situation where the people of Venezuela are rising up, as well they should.
Yeah, pretty much. This has been going on almost since 2013 when Maduro was first elected. It was called out as illegitimate at the time, and legitimacy is really the key thing for a president. So if they're in place, they're legitimate because they're in place, and whether they got there legitimately or not becomes a different thing. But with Guaido being the interim president and having such international support, it's difficult to see how Maduro can, short of going full dictator, and more so than he is now, I don't see how he can hang on.
So last week, Mike Pompeo and Mike Pence both said, quote, "We're with the people of Venezuela." Trump was, of course, naturally a little more circumspect. What did he have to say?
So Trump mentioned, not quite as strongly for the support, that he was with the people of Venezuela and with democracy, whereas Pompeo, Pence, and Bolton were all very much backing the Operation Liberty, as Guaido's called it. They're very much, we are behind you on this. I think obviously Donald Trump has to be a little more circumspect on that.
So the U.S. and some 50 countries already recognize Guaido as Venezuela's president, and sanctions have been imposed against the Maduro government. They're basically trying to speed things up. So what's the international feeling on this?
Well, the international feel is really that what's happening with the other countries giving support, that's a pretty important thing, because what it shows the actual people on the ground, the millions of people who are still left in Venezuela, by the way. Remember, they've lost about 5 million people fleeing west and south to Cambodia and Brazil. But it shows the people who are left that they're not alone in their situation. So the international support, they actually know this time, especially because of social media being so prevalent in this day and age, they actually are aware that people are watching the situation. They're not alone. and that any, let's say, human rights violations, serious human rights violations that take place, will not go unreported. They're aware that there's backup around the sanctions and stuff. Maybe not so much. That doesn't really impact the people on the ground. And of course, Maduro, his way of shoring up the army, the sanctions don't affect that. He's rewarding them with generalships. Just there's hundreds and hundreds of generals now, and maybe not any lower ranks to deal with any of the actual work. But he's rewarding them with rank and position. So the sanctions, which would ordinarily allow him to spread cash freely, maybe those are biting there, but that's not really affecting the people.
So just point of clarification, I think you meant Colombia, not Cambodia. But anyway, lots of chiefs and not so many Indians. So Guarda said a couple of days ago, the people of Venezuela, the end of usurpation has arrived. At this moment, I am with the main military units of our armed forces, starting the final phase of Operation Liberty. People of Venezuela will go to the street with armed forces to continue taking the streets until we consolidate the end of usurpation, which is already irreversible. What do you make of those fighting words, Mark?
Well, as I say, they're clearly fighting words. This is a situation, Guaido's putting his entire future on the line. So if this doesn't work, he's going to end up like, is it Lopez, who was under house arrest, or worse? His life is effectively over if this doesn't pull off. So he's going balls to the wall in terms of trying to get this done. And I think the people of Venezuela are ready for it. There's been so much degradation, deprivation. We've seen what happens with the zoos, the animals being eaten, people sorting through trash to try and get food. This is an oil-rich country. It's an oil-rich country. The money's there. It's just not being run properly. And it's caused the hunger, the deaths of far too many.
Mark, you essentially brought up an interesting point. This is a big and bold move by Guaido to convince the military to come over to his side, but could it end ultimately in his arrest?
Yes, absolutely. If he doesn't make the transition from interim president to sitting president, and now this doesn't mean that he'll carry on in the president's position. He's made a lot of noises about he will oversee free and fair elections. But if this doesn't work for him, then he's either got to flee the country, or he will almost certainly be arrested or worse.
Well, suffice it to say that socialism in Venezuela has been nothing short of a nightmare, and the condition of its people and its economy are basically in a total shambles. And yes, we hear day after day from the Democrats in America that socialism is the new frontier. What does Venezuela and the situation there teach us about socialism in the long run, Mark?
In the long run, I think we're all pretty clear on it. It hasn't worked, and despite people saying it hasn't been done right, and if we just did this, well, this is what every successive socialist country says and does. It's interesting to note that Cuba is one of the few countries that are openly backing Maduro. That tells you something. It's a series of not success stories who are backing the socialist plan. And it's a worry that it's gained such traction both in America and England that much of the younger generation and some of the older seem to think that socialism is the answer to all of their ills, when it's been shown again and again and again that it's not the answer to anything.
Thank you so much for doing this today on Truth is Making a Comeback. Mark Angelides, managing editor of LibertyNation.com. Have a great day, Mark.
Thanks, Lisa.
Truth is making a comeback. Visit us at LibertyNation.com.